Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today I'm going to show you exactly how to change the spark plugs on a 2014 Chevrolet Volt. So I've had a lot of people ask me, is changing the spark plugs on a Volt or a Prius or some sort of hybrid pretty much the same as a regular car? And the short answer is yes, but the long answer is, but a factor a lot of people don't consider is how often the engine is on. A normal rule of thumb, about 60,000 miles is right around when you want to change your spark plugs, depending on the make and model and use of the vehicle. But with this car, technically it could have never turned the engine on or turned it on very sparingly, and just because the car has 100,000 miles doesn't mean that the engine has ran for 100,000 miles. So it's gonna kind of be up to your discretion, but between you and me, if the car is at 90,000 miles, I would just go ahead and do it. Or if the engine is on a lot and you're at 60,000 miles, I would just go ahead and do it. It's not very difficult, and I'm gonna show you exactly how to do it and save tons of money. And I'll show you exactly at the end how much you're saving. With all that out of the way, let's jump in. So in order to get our spark plugs, we actually need to remove this, which is a part of the air filtration system. It's the air filter resonator that helps kind of cut down on turbulence and feeds the engine more stable air. So we need to remove that. And there's two 8mm hose clamps holding that in place. Alternatively, you could use a standard screwdriver. So now that these hose clamps are nice and loose, we can remove the bolts holding it on. So here are the two fasteners holding the resonator on. They are T30 Torxes. Just remove those. With those bolts removed, we can kind of just lift straight up with the resonator box. And it's not going to want to come out because the boots are still on the air box here. Take that off, and then remove that one, and then we can remove the resonator and get it out of there. And wow, is that dirty under there. Woo! Gross. So here is the top of our engine. This is our ignition coil module, and it is pretty dirty under here because the resonator sits on top of there. And way down in there, between the coil module and the valve cover, right down there, you can see just a ton of grit and grime that is going to fall right into the spark plug well as soon as we remove the ignition coil boot. So what we need to do is get some compressed air and blow it in there and get all that junk out of there. None of that can make it inside of the engine. If you don't have an air compressor, canned air from an electronics store will work perfectly fine, and the link is located down below in the description. So let's get some compressed air and blow all that out of there. So compressed air. All right, now all that gunk is out of there. We can take the coil pack off, but I recommend cleaning the rest of this. I'm gonna go ahead and clean it. I'm not gonna show you that, it's just regular cleaning. And then we're gonna take the coil pack off and continue. But truthfully, all the big contaminants are out of the way. You could probably get away with just taking the coil pack off and go into town, but I'm gonna go ahead and give this a cleaning anyway. There we go, that's much better. All I did was hose it down with some Windex and wipe it off with a towel. I think it looks a lot better, and it's a lot easier to work with clean engines than dirty ones. Now we can focus on getting the ignition coil pack module off. So it only has one connector, which is handy, and I've found that using a standard screwdriver to move the safety backward is helpful. As soon as you hear that click, the safety is out of the way. So this connector can be a little tricky, making sure that it's fully depressed all the way like this. I'm trying to move it back. It's kind of the key here. There we go. So pushing right there with the small standard screwdriver and watching that actuate backward like that really seemed to help and get that off there, because this safety's a little proud. Then we can take a T30 Torx again and remove the bolts holding the module to the top of the engine. And then this module just lifts straight up. It might take a little convincing. There we go. Let's take the coil packs out, and you can see that they kind of came apart a little bit. This is okay. I will show you how to put it back together. And what happens is this boot gets stuck on the spark plug because they've been in there for a decade. So it's not uncommon for these rubber boots to get stuck there or even rip and tear and be useless. So if this does rip and you have a problem with that, I would go ahead and just get new ones. They're not very expensive and you can just put them on. They just pull on and off. So let's get this guy out of the way. So I'll show you how to remove a stuck ignition coil boot. So remove the electrode first. You can just take that out of the way. And then a pair of decently long pliers kind of grip the inside like this. rotate it around, and then you should be able to just kind of seesaw it back and forth while you pull straight up. Might take a little more twisting. Like I said, it is not uncommon for these to have problems shredding. There we go. So if your boot shreds while you're taking it on the way up, you can just buy new ones of these. They're not very expensive. And just be careful about dirt getting in there. There's a little bit of dirt right there, but it is very minimal. So before we start pulling plugs, let's go ahead and wipe down the head surface, or valve cover surface rather. Just to make sure it's not super dirty when we're taking plugs in and out. This looks pretty good. And I know I can hear you, oh, you might have put dirt in the spark plug well. You're right. So we're gonna get some compressed air and blow each and every one of those out. The next tip I have for you is just WD-40. What I like to do is just spray a little bit into the spark plug well and have that just kind of penetrate the threads a little bit. And why I'm doing that is so hopefully when I remove these plugs, they don't get seized up in the head, because that'd be a total bummer. Truthfully, these engines aren't known for that problem, but it is a really easy precaution and there's really no downside to doing that. So put some WD-40 in there, let it sit for like 20 minutes at least, and then we can get to pulling plugs out. Or if you don't want to do that, just skip that step and go right to pulling the plugs. So what I'm going to do next is grab my standard 5/8 spark plug socket, link down below in the description, with a small extension on it. And we're just going to put that on the plug nut until it seats down like that. Make sure that it is fully seated on the spark plug. You really don't want to round that off. And then I can attach my ratchet and start loosening. So sometimes when you're moving a spark plug, you can hear it make that kind of awful noise. What I like to do is just tighten it back up a skosh and then loosen it, tighten it, then loosen it, tighten it, then loosen it. And you're just gonna keep doing that for a while. And what that does is it kind of just seesaws the threads a little bit so they come out cleaner. There we go. See, it doesn't make that awful noise anymore. And you always want to use hand tools when removing your spark plug. You don't want to use, you know, like an impact implement or something like that. And then once we're sure the threads are going to clear, we can remove our plug and check that out. So our WD-40 has definitely made it to the bottom of the threads, which is excellent because that kind of helps preserve those in that little seesawing action where you tighten in an 1/8 turn and loosen in a 1/4 turn until it stops making that grinding sound has really preserved the threads. You can look on there and see that the threads are in very good condition and not all ruined. Very cool. You can definitely tell these are the stock plugs. So these have never, ever been changed. So it's a good thing we're changing them today. And the cool thing is, all the plugs are exactly the same. So just do what I did for this one on the other 3. So here is our old plug. I'm going to use it to compare it to my new one, which is made by NGK. They're the Ruthenium RX, and those are all very confidence-inspiring buzzwords. Here is the part number for you, and the link is down below in the description. I really like using NGKs. They're my preferred brand of spark plug. Oh good, it came with a sheath, that's pretty cool. Now before I do anything on a spark plug when I'm trying to install it, I have a gloved hand, or you can do this very lightly, and I just spin the porcelain around in my fingers, and what I'm feeling for is cracks. If a plug is cracked, it's not gonna work. Don't even bother putting it in. So we can remove this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and check the gap. The gap is 28 thousandths of an inch. So let's put it on our gap tool, and it looks like it's at about 38. So let's go ahead and change that real quick. We got close, a little more. There we go. Now the gap looks like it's right on the money. Perfect. And you'll look that these are interesting because they have like a prong at the top and a prong at the bottom. So make sure you take into account when you're doing that. Now with our gap set, we can go ahead and put some anti-seize. Just a little dab on the beginning of the threads like that is perfectly fine. In the installer's manual, it said nothing about anti-seize, but I'm always leery about putting plugs in an engine without it. So I'm going to put a little bit there. Now this part is very important. You need to load the spark plug up in the spark plug socket perfectly, because if you go like this and you go sideways and you crack the porcelain again, it's no good. So we need to just kind of line it up and put it in, and now it won't fall out and we can go back to our engine. So now we can very gingerly load our spark plug and socket assembly down into the head and start spinning. If it doesn't feel quite right, it might be cross-threaded, so take it back out. It should thread on literally this easy with just 2 fingers like this. And then we'll stop spinning with 2 fingers and we can grab our torque wrench. I've set my torque wrench to 18 foot-pounds, which is the torque specification. I do recommend getting a torque wrench for this job. It's important that the spark plug doesn't strip inside of the head, because now you're in a lot of trouble. Just go ahead and torque her down. There you go, 18. And then what I like to do is I hold the extension with one hand and remove the torque wrench with the other, because that means I can very gingerly pull the socket straight up and out. You don't want to go sideways and get all crazy with it, because you can crack the porcelain. I notice a theme here with this job. You want to make sure that porcelain is intact. So go ahead and do that for the other 3 spark plugs. Now let's get our coil pack ready for installation. Now, if yours came out all nice and is ready to go, and you can see down in there and the spring stayed put where it needs to be, you're pretty much made in the shade. And all you need to do is get some dielectric grease and put it inside of the boot like that, and you can put it back on. But what if you do, if the boot came off and the spring fell off and all the rest of it? So this is what you need to do, is you take this bit here, this tip, and you put it down into the coil pack, making sure that's not gonna fall off. Very good. Grab the boot, slide it over like that, and then you can look down in there, and my spring is a little sideways in there, and that's no good. So I'm just going to grab a small screwdriver and orientate it so that way the spring, it looks like that. And go ahead and do that for the rest of these 2 and make sure all of them look like this. Put some dielectric grease in there. Link down below in the description, and we can put this back on our car. So with now all of our boots installed and dielectric greased up, we can just take our coil pack and drop it straight down on our plugs, exactly how we found it with the connector to our right, and then just push it down on there. Nice. Then we can place our silver T30 Torxes. And then the torque spec for this is 71 inch-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench that can go that low, link down below in the description. But between you and me, wrist height would be perfectly acceptable. You don't need to torque this down if you ask me, but everyone seems to like it when I do it. Then we can plug our electrical connector back in, just slide it over until you hear the click, and then put the safety back into its home, and that's not gonna fall off. Then we can replace our air resonator box, and that has those 2 boots we need to put on the box. And it's a little cumbersome, but you'll get it. That looks pretty good. And put that into its home, and then line this up like that. Then we can tighten those hose clamps up with our 8mm. And a lot of people always ask me, you know, do these have a torque spec? No, they don't. And truthfully, I wouldn't use it anyway. Just wrist tight is perfectly fine for those guys. I mean, you can use a standard screwdriver, so it's not crazy tight. As long as the boot's not going to fall off, you're made in the shade. And then we can kind of configure our resonator until it lines up on its home. You can tell it's lined up because the oil cap and these 2 bolt holes will line up with the threads down there. Then we can replace our bolts. And then the torque spec for these guys is 80 inch-pounds. Again, if you don't have a torque wrench that goes that low, that's perfectly fine. Just wrist tight is acceptable. There you go. And then before you take it out on the road, go ahead and make sure it starts and runs okay. Runs awesome. Now the thing runs better than ever, and this thing's ready to go back on the road. So that is how to change the spark plugs on a 2014 Chevrolet Volt. Very easy, very straightforward, very approachable, and something you could totally do at home, in your garage, or heck, even in a auto parts store parking lot. It is super, super easy. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I would show you exactly how much you're saving, so let's dive into that. So this job, on the book, they can charge 2.7 hours worth of work. Personally, it would not take me anywhere near that. If I wasn't even filming, which always adds a ton of time onto a job, only took me about an hour and 20 minutes with adjusting the camera and worrying about lighting and things like that. If I wasn't filming, half an hour, maybe. It is really, really simple. But the dealer is going to charge you 2.7 hours no matter how long it took the tech to do the work. And 2.7 hours multiplied by $125 an hour, it's kind of what dealers charge, and that varies, you know, state to state and location to location, but again, it's a good rule of thumb, ends up being $337.05 just for the work. And they're probably going to charge you another, I don't know, $100 for the plugs. And I know that's crazy, but the plugs that go in it are these special ruthenium plugs apparently, and I bought them for $60, so no way they're gonna charge you less than $100 for those plugs, especially if you take it to the dealer. So you're looking at like $440 before taxes, just to get your spark plug changed on your Volt. Was that job worth $440? I don't think so. You be the judge, though, if it's something out of your skill set, but I believe that it is in your skill set. I think it's in everybody's skill set. So for the price of the plugs, which was $60, you're saving hundreds upon hundreds of dollars just doing the work yourself, and you know the job's done correctly. So I hope this helps you with your automotive decision journey on whether or not you want to do your plugs yourself or not. I advocate doing the plugs yourself. They're very, very easy. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them, or you can go to our website, twocarpros.com, and ask a question for absolutely free, and an automotive expert will be along shortly to help you. Thank you so very much for watching. If you found this video helpful or interesting at all, please consider giving it a like or even subscribing. It really helps my channel out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.